Vanished into the Night is not the film that I expected. I did enjoy it, but they did end up ultimately ruining what otherwise was a really great experience. Well, maybe they didn't completely ruin it, but they left me feeling really annoyed. So there will be spoilers at the end of this discussion, and I will explain what I mean by that, but for the most part, this will be spoiler free. I'm giving away nothing because it was not at all what I expected, and that really took me by surprise. But I do recommend it. This was released this year in 2024. It's directed by Renato de Maria, and it stars Riccardo Scamarcio as Pietro, and I apologise if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. And we also have Annabelle Wallis as Elena. And they are a couple going through a divorce, and the children are staying with their father, and they go missing. He goes to check on them. They're not there. And I won't say any more than that, actually. That basically only takes us up to the first maybe 15, 20 minutes of the film. I realise I'm not giving away that much information, but this is all I had going into it. I knew that it was about children who have gone missing, and I thought it would be one kind of film. It absolutely isn't. At the end, I will go into more detail with a spoiler warning in case you do want to know what happens, but I didn't know any more than that, and it ended up going in a direction that I had not predicted. And one of the big reveals towards the end, well, in the final third of the film, I didn't see coming. I really enjoyed the direction it took. I found it really surprising, really engaging. It's not necessarily my kind of film. Stories about missing children or missing people in general, absolutely. But this becomes something else. And if I'd read the description of this on paper, I might not have watched it. So I'm kind of glad that I watched it thinking it would be one film, and then what we got was something kind of different, but I rather liked it. So I'm glad that I had a reason to watch it, whereas I might not have done if I'd known a little bit more about it. And Pietro is a really interesting character because for about half of the film, I found him to be really unlikable. And then for about half of the film, that actually turned around and I found him to be a really interesting and very likable character. So it was a really bizarre experience. I feel like the pacing of the narrative is great, and the characters and performances are all really well done. Not necessarily always likable characters, but they are well written with some really solid performances and a completely unpredictable narrative. So I'd say I do recommend it, but don't expect it to be about what you think it's going to be about. I really can't say any more than that. Without spoiling it, I will, of course, in a minute, go into more detail. But if you're looking for a film that's unpredictable, compelling, with some great performances, go for it. I don't think it's going to be for everybody. On paper, if I'd had more information, I don't think it would have been for me. So I'm glad I didn't have any more information because I probably wouldn't have watched it, and I'm glad that I did. Apart from one thing really, really irritated me. And I guess I will discuss that now. So to sum up very briefly, really interesting story, generally well written, not at all predictable, really great performances, suspenseful, definitely one that I think is worth checking out. So huge spoilers from now as I explain what happens and the one bit that just really irritated me so much. Not to the point where it ruined the overall experience, but it did leave me not feeling as satisfied as I otherwise could have been. And basically what we find out, this is the big reveal towards the end, I'd say in the last kind of 20-25 minutes or so, we find out that the children had never been kidnapped at all. And the penny dropped for me when his wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, sent him the voice note to prove that she'd recorded him and what he was saying. He was talking about carrying the drugs and to getting this money, and she was going to use this against him to take the children and get sole custody of the children. And that's disgusting. I had no feelings about her. This is, of course, Elena. I had no feelings about her up until that point. And then when I realised that she was behind this, I instantly hated her. And we find out that she drugged the children, took them from their father's house, staged the kidnap to then ultimately make him look bad and get the children for herself. And I didn't see that coming. And I found that to be an absolute delight. I mean, I felt anger and frustration at her as a character, But as a viewer, I also felt a lot of satisfaction in the direction it went because it was so unpredictable. But it made sense once you could connect the dots. It's not one of those twists that it comes out of nowhere and then it doesn't make sense. Everything does make sense. Well, for the most part, things make sense. And I think it was a really great direction to take the story. However, what really annoyed me to no end, and I did a lot of Googling afterwards in case I was missing something, and thankfully I wasn't. At the very end, Pietro turns around, the children are at his house, and we see this figure through the door, and it's very clearly Elena. And that's how it ends. And in general, I hate ambiguous endings, but this ending made no sense. I was genuinely waiting for her to do something horrendous, like shooting him and then running away with the children. That's what I expected to happen. And then she had all of this evidence that he'd been caught up in drugs and things, so the police would probably be assuming, well, somebody shot him, he just had all of this dirty money, that's clearly the motivation, and she would have gotten away with it. But that's where the film ends. And I don't know if they were planning a sequel and we'd find out more, but I feel like it's not a film that needs a sequel. So I hated that. I absolutely detested the ending and they ruined it because the last kind of 15-20 minutes of the film were absolutely fantastic. And then we have this diabolical ending. And as I said, I Googled it, I read some people's blogs, I basically Googled ending explained, and everywhere was saying there's no logic, it makes no sense. And I'm glad that I wasn't alone in that. So, utterly horrendous way to end the film. It really ruined what was otherwise a great film. And I assume they did it because they didn't know how else to end it. They wanted something potentially powerful and thought-provoking, but it was very weak and without thought, to be perfectly honest. I don't think they thought it through very much at all, unless they are planning a sequel and they were setting that up, but I don't think it needs a sequel. Will I watch it if there's a sequel? Oh yes, absolutely, I will. But I don't think it needs one. And not every film needs a sequel. Let's have some fresh stories for a change rather than milking things for all it's worth. With that being said, it hasn't got the best reception online. There are a lot of very negative reviews about this, and I didn't read any of those reviews before watching it. I haven't actually read that many. I've just looked at the ratings, and it's not the best received, so I don't know if they'd even do a sequel. I have no idea. But for now, all I can say is those last few seconds were very poorly done. In my opinion, as a viewer, it was a very bad decision. But the events leading up to it were pretty great. So, Vanished into the Night is not at all the film I was expecting. But I did ultimately enjoy it. The last few seconds aside, it is actually a pretty decent film and I am happy to recommend it.